Hey, welcome back or welcome for the first time. To all my new listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. To all of my day 1, 2, 97, 243, or whatever week you chose to tune in and keep listening, you already know I genuinely appreciate y'all. Now, let me ask y'all something real quick. Have you ever wanted something so bad that you started doing whatever you needed to do to try to help make it happen? And by help, I actually mean quietly trying to control every detail, every outcome, every conversation, every response, every timeline, and every possible opening so that it goes the way you want it to go. And I feel like we've all been there in some way or another, right? So maybe it was a relationship or an opportunity. Maybe it was a job or a friendship. It could have been clarity that you wanted from someone or a conversation that you were hoping would go a certain way. Or maybe it was a door that you wanted to open so badly that you started checking the doorknob every 5 minutes like, okay, God, what are we doing? And honestly, I think one of the most uncomfortable things to admit is when our desire starts turning into manipulation. And I know that word is a little aggressive because nobody wants to think of themselves as manipulative. We're not going to say, yeah, you know what I'm saying? I was trying to manipulate the outcome to get what I want. But we are okay with calling it being intentional, or we are okay with saying that we were being strategic, or we'd rather call it protecting our heart or making sure that we have clarity. And we're good with saying, I'm just trying to do my part, right? And sometimes that's true. Sometimes you are being intentional. Sometimes you are being wise. Sometimes you do need to communicate or take action. But sometimes we're trying to force something that God has not released, or sometimes we're trying to manage someone else's response, or we're trying to create a result that we don't actually have the power to produce. And sometimes we're calling it faith when it's really fear with a plan. And I'm going to be honest, because that's something the Lord has been convicted me of in this season. And there have been times where I've told myself that I was just being thoughtful or being clear or just trying to understand something better. But underneath all of that was this desire to make something go the way that I wanted it to go. And I think that's where it gets tricky because manipulation does not always look dramatic. So it's not always this whole thing where we're lying or scheming or doing something that's obviously wrong. But man, it could be that we're over-explaining because we want someone to finally see our point. Or it could be the times that you're withholding how you really feel because you're trying to control how someone sees you. It also could be the times that you're bringing something up, quote unquote, casually because you're hoping the other person takes the bait. Sometimes it's when we're replaying a conversation and then planning the perfect response so that the outcome feels more secure. Or sometimes it's when we're trying to be a version of ourselves that we think will get chosen. It could also be the times that we're staying silent, but we're not staying silent because we have peace. We're staying silent because we're hoping that our silence will make someone respond. And let's talk about that for a second, because sometimes silence is wisdom, but sometimes it's strategy, because we're not being quiet because God told us to be still. Sometimes we're being quiet because we're hoping the other person notices our absence, feels bad, and comes running back with an apology, a paragraph, and emotional maturity that they didn't have 2 days ago. And listen, that would be lovely if it played out that way, but that's still manipulation. And I think the reason this gets so uncomfortable is because most of us are not trying to be controlling just for the sake of being controlling. A lot of times, control is connected to fear. So it could be fear of disappointment or rejection. It could be fear of being forgotten or fear of looking foolish. It could be fear of being vulnerable and not being met with that same level of vulnerability. It could be fear of waiting and then nothing happening, or fear of letting go and then realizing that the thing was never really ours to begin with. So instead of sitting with that fear, we start managing and we manage how we show up, what we say. We manage how much we reveal and how available we are. We manage how spiritual we sound and our image, or we try to manage the timing and the narrative. And all of that can feel really productive, but it's actually really exhausting. Like, that was a lot of things that I just mentioned. And here's the thing, trying to control an outcome that we were never meant to will drain us. It also will make us anxious. It makes us overthink. It makes us read into everything. So a text message, a pause, a change in tone, a delayed response, change in energy, or a door that's not opening fast enough. And now instead of being present, we're monitoring. And I think that's one of the biggest signs that we may be trying to manipulate the outcome is when we're no longer at peace because we're constantly monitoring whether the situation is moving in the direction we want it to. And that's not rest, it's surveillance. And when you think about it, who wants to live like that? Like, who wants to constantly feel like they have to manage the outcome, the room, the person, the opportunity, the moment? All of that, that's really exhausting. And I think the Lord has really been showing me that if I have to manipulate something to get it, I may not be mature enough to steward it, or it may not even be for me. And that can be difficult at times because sometimes we just want what we want. So we want the relationship to work. We want the person to choose us. We want the opportunity to come through, or we want the conversation to go well, or the door to open. And we want the plan to make sense, right? Or we just want the outcome that we pictured. And it's not wrong to want those things, but it becomes dangerous when the desire starts leading us instead of being submitted to God. Because when desire is leading, we'll start justifying things. So we'll ignore red flags, or we'll override our peace, we'll compromise our values, or we'll keep pushing when God is telling us to pause, and we'll call it persistence when it's really pressure, and then we'll call it discernment when it's really anxiety trying to find evidence. And here's the thing, sometimes I can be like, I'm just discerning the situation, and God is like, no, girl, you're actually spiraling. And there's a difference, because discernment brings clarity, but anxiety brings chaos. Discernment can actually sit still, but anxiety needs constant updates. Discernment listens, but anxiety investigates. And sometimes when we're trying to manipulate a situation, we convince ourselves that we're just trying to get clarity, but clarity that has to be forced usually does not bring peace. It actually brings more questions, more reaching, more checking, more emotional gymnastics. And that's usually a sign that something is off, because what God has for us will not require us to abandon ourselves to obtain it. It doesn't require us to become someone we're not. It doesn't require constant striving, proving, plotting, and pushing. And I know that can be frustrating because sometimes surrender feels like you're not doing anything. And if you're anything like me, doing nothing can feel very uncomfortable because I want to contribute. I want to assist with what's going on, or send one more message, clarify one more thing, create one more opportunity, or just slide in with a very innocent question that's actually not innocent at all. And God is like, no, I need you to not do that. And that no can feel annoying, but here's the thing. Sometimes that no is protection, because manipulation often gets us outcomes that our character, peace, or future actually can't afford. And one thing I've been learning is that just because you can make something happen doesn't mean you should. So you can get the response or the attention, or you can force the door or create the moment and then influence the outcome. But then what? Because now you have something that you had to keep alive with pressure. Or now you have something that only worked because you overfunction. Or now you have something that requires you to keep performing in order to maintain it. And that's not peace. That's a project. And God didn't call you to turn your life into a full-time emotional construction site. But the reality is that some of us are tired because we've been trying to build what God never asked us to build. or we've been trying to sustain what he never gave us, or we've been trying to revive what he already told us to release. It could even be that we're trying to make things fit that don't actually fit, and then we wonder why we're exhausted. And I think part of maturity is learning the difference between obedience and control. Because obedience may require action. It may also require hard conversations or courage. It may require showing up or making a move. But here's the thing. Obedience is submitted. Control, on the other hand, is anxious. Obedience trusts God with the outcome, but control tries to become responsible for the outcome. And that's where I think we have to really check our motives. So before we send the text, before we have the conversation, or before we make the decision or try to open that door or even try to push something forward, we may need to ask, am I doing this from a place of peace or a place of panic? Am I being honest or am I trying to get a reaction? Am I communicating clearly, or am I trying to control how this person responds? Am I making a wise move, or am I scared nothing will happen if I don't force it? Am I trusting God, or am I trying to make sure that I don't have to? And those aren't easy questions to answer, because sometimes the answer will expose us. But here's the thing. Exposure is not always punishment. Sometimes God exposes a pattern because he wants to free us from it. Because manipulation may get us the outcome, but it will not give us peace. And sometimes the outcome that you're trying so hard to create is not even the thing you actually need. Because sometimes what you need is healing, or patience, or surrender, or even just the truth. And sometimes what you need is finally to admit that if you have to work this hard to make something happen, maybe it's not aligned. And I think that's where surrender comes in. And I don't mean surrender in the cute way. So not with the aesthetic journal and the candle lit and the soft worship music in the background. I mean the kind where you say, God, I really want this thing, but I'm not willing to manipulate myself, someone else, or the situation to get it. The kind where you say, if I have to force it, I don't want it. And here's the thing, that sentence sounds really good, but when you really want that, or when you really care, or when your feelings are already involved, or when you can see exactly how it could work out if this one person would just act right, that's when surrender gets real. Because surrender is not pretending that you don't want something. Surrender is telling the truth about what you want and still choosing not to make it your God. It's saying, I do care, but I trust God more. It's saying, I do want this, but I will not lose myself trying to get it. It's also saying, I have this desire, but I don't want to be led by desperation. And honestly, that's how I'm trying to grow. So I'm not trying to pretend like I'm perfect or emotionless. And I'm definitely not always calm, but I really do want to be submitted, self-aware, healthy, and free, because there is freedom in not having to make everything happen. And there's freedom in not feeling like I have to manage every outcome. There's freedom in letting people choose or letting doors close. There's even freedom in letting God reveal what is actually aligned for me. And there's freedom in knowing that what belongs to me does not require manipulation to maintain it. And I think that's what I really want y'all to hear, because if you're exhausted from trying to control the outcome, you can stop trying to control the outcome. You can be honest with yourself. You can do your part. You can communicate clearly and obey God, but you don't have to manipulate the situation to get what's for you, because what is for you will require wisdom, obedience, and stewardship, but it will not require self-betrayal, emotional games, and it won't require you to become a different version of yourself just to keep it. So if you're feeling that tension right now, I really want to encourage you to take a step back and ask God, what is underneath that need to control? Is it fear? Is it insecurity? Is it impatience? Is it disappointment? Is it a wound that still needs to heal? Or is it just a pattern that you've been caught up in? Because sometimes the things we're trying to control is not the issue. Sometimes the real issue is what control is helping us to avoid feeling. And God doesn't just want to change our outcomes. He wants to heal our hearts. He wants to mature our desires. He wants to teach us how to move from a place of peace instead of panic. And he wants to remind us that surrender is not losing, because sometimes surrender is the exact way that you get free. So my hope and prayer for you is that you would have the courage to release what you've been trying to force, and that you would trust God enough to be honest and let him control the outcome. And that you wouldn't confuse manipulation with strategy or anxiety with discernment. And that you would remember that if God has to be pushed out of the way for you to get it, it probably isn't worth having. It definitely isn't worth having, actually. So that's what I have for y'all this week. Thank you so much for tuning in, as always. And make sure you're taking care of yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. Be healthy in your relationships. I love y'all so much, and I will talk to y'all soon. Bye.